I I started the video a little too soon. No, I started before the video started. Hey, I was supposed to turn this on and we were going to talk about some things first, but this is a par for the course and a perfect intro for this video. So, well, we're gonna go down the rabbit hole. I figure, we're No Man's Sky players. I think if you like this game on a really fundamental level, that you're kind of, you know, a lost traveler in space, and we relate to like getting out and disconnecting to reconnect with some kind of a fake, um, I don't know, because it's procedural generated. I don't know. I feel like I'm almost kind of like reconnecting with certain things, almost nature like, because of the fractal side of nature and everything. So um, yeah, it's an escape anyway. And I think for lost souls, I think we all have this critical thinking type of thing going on, and we ask questions, and we all kind of go down a rabbit hole, or I'll just call it the high hole. The no man's high hole is what we're about to go in. Maybe that's the name of the video. So that's cool, man. So shut your high holes and let's go talk about some things. So there's a few things I've been looking at this week, and a few videos I watched and kind of like changed my mind and way I thought about some things. And I'm gonna stay in the middle. I don't want to be taking any sides here. So, and I don't really. I'm right down the middle. I do believe I'm just a critical thinker, and I think that you should be critical. And I do believe that only uh, well, everything that we watch probably today has about 15% of factual information is probably manipulated to benefit the storyteller. Even me, you, everybody. I mean, I think we should take a whole bunch of information, probably pull it together, and make our own 15% truth. And that's where we're at. So shut your high hole. And let's talk about, let's say the first thing was the Universe 25. I found this to be crazy. It was a rat experiment back in the day. And blows your mind. We're going to talk about that. And it's really cool. The next thing is Kodak. Kodak found how we had the atomic bomb here in America. We were setting things off, and Kodak was developing film and had stuff, and it goes really deep about the paper that they used, and they found out that America was setting off these bombs and test bombs because it was showing up on their paper. So I think that's very interesting. Light bulb finds. Light bulb finds and planned obsolescence. If I said that right, did I see that word? I say words wrong all the time, but we'll still have somebody wrap that up for us too here in just a minute. Yeah, definitely is a wicked, wicked rabbit hole there to go down. I think that's pretty cool. And the man in the white suit, pretty interesting. That kind of goes along with that, and that is going with how they decided that it would be best if we'd made shitty products to protect the people and the propaganda that was sent out to get everybody to buy it. I thought was pretty neat video, and it kind of goes in this whole row of people manipulating you. And then Elon Musk interview, we're gonna check that out too. So I think that's gonna be kind of cool. I'll tell you what, we're going to throw in some Brain Games too. So Brain Games is a very cool show, and maybe that could even start first too. I would say I think episode 2 starts with Brian Green. So let me go in here and let's start this up. Brain Games. I'm gonna minimize my little face over here, and let's get let's see, a good spot is over here, I think, for right now. Luminosity, Brain Games. This is really cool. I think you should go check out Brain Games. I'm gonna try to see if we can find some snippets. It's gonna blow your mind. Okay, say, I guess why it's so not probably so popular is because it shows you how vulnerable you are and how easily manipulated you are. Nobody likes to hear this, but this show actually demonstrates this for you and lets you participate along in the video, and you interact with the video, and the video proves to you how stupid your mind is and how easily manipulated you are, because your brain wants to be correct. And in this world that we live in, it's very easily to manipulate our brains because Well, if you know how the brain works and how it's supposed to be, then you can manipulate the brain. And I think it's just, man, it's a crazy rabbit hole to go down. So, Super Sense, full episode. Let's see. I don't know which one this is. I want the one with Brian Green. Brian Games. Challenge your mind with the 33 top rated games. It's 21 seconds. No. There's a there's that new guy. Key Peele is the new guy on there. I didn't know they had so many different people on there. Let's go in here and check out something real quick.
Want to play a game? Want to play a game with everyone in Times Square?
I'm gonna guess about how old somebody is without even looking at them. Think it's impossible? Check this out. I'm gonna ask you to close your eyes, and when I say go, raise up one of your feet and try to keep your balance as long as you can.
All right, sounds good.
Want to play along at home? Find a safe spot just in case you stumble. And get ready to close your eyes and pick up 1 foot. We'll put this counter on your screen.
Not the best example, but you know what I'm kind of saying. It's very interactive. It's things that you can do while you're sitting here watching it. And some things are like this. So we can tell how old somebody is by sitting there and watching how they stand up and the frequencies that you hear. We can tell how many gumballs are in a jar by averaging how many people guess them. It's really crazy. It has to, and then Google uses this algorithm to probably predict predict outcomes of putting out certain information, I would guess. I don't know. You do the math of what they could possibly do with this. I think it's really crazy, and I think the Brain Games was a really good honorable mention for this to start off everything, because you are very manipulated. And I would go in here and start off maybe on season 2. I think is where I started, and it blew my mind. And I suggest anybody. That's why I wanted to say it first. Is come over and check out the Brain Games, and it's gonna really blow your mind. Okay. All right. So next up, we're gonna talk about the Universe 25 experiment. So, let's see. Which video do we want? The older one, or we want the guy talking about it? I thought this was a good video too. I've watched all these ones too. This is a kind of a neat thing. I don't know. Let's go with the old data, because this is an older experiment.
The work of Dr. John Calhoun at the National Institute of Health in Washington, D.C.
By John Calhoun. Let's see, that's a 1972. John Calhoun conducted a series of experiments under the guidance of the National Institute of Mental Health. In these experiments, John Calhoun observed mice in their population, and it's really crazy. We're going to do this, and I'll stop it a little bit and talk and give you my mind
attempted to answer
thoughts.
This question. In a unique experiment that took years to complete, Dr. Calhoun used white mice to study population growth and its effects on individual behavior. In addition to his renowned research papers, he has recorded some of these observations on film. In this 16-cell mouse habitat, utopian conditions of nutrition, comfort, and housing were provided for a potential population of over 3,000 mice.
So this is weird, why would they be doing an experiment like this? Why would you want to take some mammals that we do a lot of experiments on that kind of, I think this probably goes way back. This is probably not the first time. First of all, it's rats. I bet if you went back into Chinese history, the Chinese probably already knew this. They had this weird theory of this circle of life with how the males are compared to females. Not saying that a male is better than a female. We all have our strong points, nurturing and destruction and the duality and things like that. There's supposed to be a duality. I think that the whole lesson of this, of everything here, is a duality. So let's continue on without my jibber jabber.
Yet, in spite of ideal conditions, the mouse population met with catastrophe. Individuals were kept track of by color markings on their fur.
So perfect utopian conditions. Everything, every need is met. Everything that you could ever want. You know, I mean, if you know about the Christian religion, you know, like that even God himself is like, he can't just have it all. It's got to be like, even like, you know, your love. He wants you to give it to him, you know, like it's got to be, you know, choice and duality. There's got to be pain and suffering, and there's got to be light and dark. It's kind of crazy to see that. So these are mice going into just perfect conditions.
Factors which normally control population growth, such as predation by owls or cats, were eliminated. Transmissible disease was also reduced. In effect, the mouse universe simulated the present situation of a continually expanding population of humans.
The eerie music just sells it.
To see how Dr. Calhoun's mouse universe grew, we'll use the familiar population graph again. Within the first 100 days, the mice went through the period Dr. Calhoun called strive. This was a period of adjustment.
That's what we need.
Territories were established and nests were made.
We need to strive.
The next period lasted about 250 days. The
No surprise.
population of the mice doubled every 60 days. This was called the exploit period.
All right.
The use of resources became unequal. Although each living unit was identical in structure and opportunities, more...
So I'll just say, like, this experiment was done several different times. We'll see maybe later on. I'll jump around a little bit. And, you know, they give these mice, I mean, they say something like, you know, 13,000 mice can drink at once without disturbing another one, or 5,500 mice can eat at the same time without there being any disruption. I mean, there's enough room in sleeping quarters for every damn mouse. There shouldn't be any issues.
Food and water was consumed in some areas. As the population increased, most mice associated eating and drinking with the presence of others.
Social
and
lumping.
Crowding developed in certain units. The third period, consisting of 300 days, found the population of mice leveling off. This was called the equilibrium period. Dr. Calhoun noticed that the newer generations of young were inhibited, since most space was already socially defined.
Since most socially space was already socially defined. You know, they can't find a purpose. They're not going out and needing to nest, or, you know, that natural instinct that we need is not being met. You know, everything else is being met. So it's just very interesting to me.
At this time, some unusual behavior became noticeable. Violence became prevalent. Excess males strived for acceptance.
Well, they say the idle hands are the work of the devil. You know, not to get all, like, you know, I'm not religious. Like I said, I'm right down the middle, but I like to, I'll use analogies and whatever you call those things from any side, wherever I can get it from.
Were rejected and withdrew. Huddling together, they would exhibit brief flurries of violence among themselves. The effects of violence became increasingly visible. Certain individuals became targets of repeated attack. These individuals would have badly chewed and scarred tails. Other young mice growing into adulthood...
See, I would like to know if there was any particular actions or behavioral things that particular rat was doing. interesting. I would like to dig a little bit more on this. I'd say it's worth digging into, you know.
Dr. Calhoun called these individuals the beautiful ones.
Absolutely
Their time was
crazy.
devoted solely to grooming, eating, and sleeping.
The beautiful ones. Now this is absolutely crazy. So after all this disruption, so the next generation or the last generation to come out of this experiment that goes on how many ever days? It looked like it was like a couple years or whatever. You know, they talking about how many the graph that went up. You know, and this final phase is just like a give up phase. Like there's nothing else to live for, and you know, what's the need? What is there to fight for? We have no strive. It's reached the end. It's just very kind of, it's just kind of weird. Watch it, and then the name of the beautiful ones just blows my mind.
They never involved themselves with others, engaged in sex, nor would they fight. All appeared as a beautiful exhibit of the species.
No sexual
with
drive.
keen, alert eyes and a healthy, well-kept body. These mice, however, could not cope with unusual stimuli. Though they looked inquisitive, they were, in fact, very stupid.
So, I mean, they were called the beautiful ones, and they couldn't handle anything. And they withdrew and gave up on everything, pretty much, is basically what, like, you know, kind of what I'm seeing. And just went back to, like, I don't know. I mean, everything is met. You're just going to go sleep, eat, clean yourself, go poop. You have nothing to do with anybody else. Nothing else interests you. I mean, what is there? I feel like this is what would be like what a god would feel like, or if you lived forever. You would just get so fucking bored. You'd want to die just to feel something.
Period the die phase, leading the population into extinction. Although the mouse utopia could house 3,000, the population began to decline at 2,200.
Didn't reach full capacity. Fell off way short.
In the shift from the equilibrium to
Not
the
way
die
short,
phase,
but significantly.
each animal became less aware of associates, despite all animals being pushed closer together. Dr. Calhoun concluded that the mice could not effectively deal with the repeated contact of so many individuals.
They just can't handle it. I mean, we're just too, yeah. And then look at the social media apps. They push us all together, and then we can't even bite each other's tails or anything. Man, it's weird. I think this, you know, this and the brain games and everything else, and then watch all this other stuff. It just kind of like, it makes you go, you know.
The evidence of violence increased to the point where most individuals had had their tails bitten to some degree.
Yeah.
Eventually,
Everybody gets
the
bit.
entire mouse population perished. Dr. Calhoun's experiment is a classic example of a typical population and its growth when left unchecked. Research in this area continues under his
So now they do it
supervision.
with
Currently,
those were mice.
Dr.
Now they do it
James
with
Hill has
rats
taken the basics
in a
of the
different
Calhoun
thing. It's kind of a little bit
to
more
study social behavior even more
advanced
closely.
experience.
In his experiments, rats are used instead of mice. Healthy individuals are selected to start the population. The rats are anesthetized so that Dr. Hill can perform a minor operation necessary to the success of his experiments. A small electromagnetic encapsulated device is implanted into every rat. This small unit enables sensing devices to keep track of the movement and position of each individual in the population.
So we're adding some
After
technology to
surgery,
this now.
The rats are introduced to their new, multi-leveled home, all at the same time. The rats immediately begin to explore their new environment, prior to organizing territories and nesting. Dr.
See, and this struggle seems kind of to be like this drive to live, you know, and maybe like, I don't know. There's the absence of the birds hunting them and things like that, you know. I don't know. The struggle, the butterfly in the cocoon. If you cut the cocoon open and let the butterfly out, it's going to die because it didn't have that struggle coming out.
Dr. Hill will trace how individuals move about in crowded situations. This movement is followed by tubular sensing devices. Every time a rat enters or passes through a tube,
I should make this
the
into a
unit
No Man's Sky
detects
build.
and registers its presence.
Universe
This
25.
constant movement is monitored by computer.
We'll pull up the model for this.
Nesting activity is also studied. Dr. Hill has observed that the larger the population, the less care a mother gives to her nest and young. The same type of individuals that resulted in the mouse utopia are also emerging in the rat population. There are aggressives, asocials, and outcasts.
I think the mother care kind of hit home for me right there. The larger the population got, the less care for the home and the nesting and everything.
Though these studies use animals, the findings about population growth and individual behavior are being closely compared to our own human population. Like all populations,
And don't laugh at that. I mean, you know, it's a lot. We are complex, but I think you know, these little fundamental things. You can say whatever you want, but when you're sitting there by yourself and you're sitting there thinking you're those weird little thoughts, or you have these little inner things, you know that you're this animalistic thing and basic instinct, naturistic drive that you have. It's true.
that have existed on this planet, many researchers believe that the human race has reached a crucial point in the exploit phase, a point where important decisions must be made.
Yeah, well, I mean, there we go. We'll end it there. We won't gonna finish that up, but it's you know, that's kind of, it blows your mind right there a little bit with that experiment, and just think about that. Like, I mean, gosh, I don't think that was the first thing. I bet this has probably been done with like people or something, man. Who knows? I had this crazy thought, like, you know, like there's some test tube lab of human warrior army that will just come out here pretty soon, and I don't know, it'd be weird. I don't know. Who knows? Whatever we know is this much of probably the truth. That's all I can say. So next up, what do we have down here? The Kodak found the. Okay, let's check this out. This is really cool. How Kodak found the atomic bomb. Hopefully, yeah, this guy does it really good. Let's check him out. This is really cool. This is a cool video. We're gonna go down this hole a little bit, and we'll bounce around a little bit. But
his findings were.
let's get back a little bit.
Part of this video was sponsored by HBO Max and their new show, Raised by Wolves.
I don't know about the Raised by Wolves.
There's
I'll have to check that out.
in the New Mexico desert, open to the public for just 2 days out of the year. But I got to visit by myself with only a small film crew. This is the Trinity
He
bomb
reminds me of
test
a boy
site,
named
where on July
Sharkfino down in
16th,
Florida.
1945, at exactly 5:29 and 45 seconds in the morning, the first nuclear bomb was exploded. And the test was called Trinity. There was actually a tower here that stood 100 feet, or about 30 meters. The list of people who witnessed the test reads like a who's who of 20th century physics. Fermi, Feynman, Oppenheimer, von Neumann. But the test was...
If you don't know who these people are, you should probably do a little bit of history. This kind of knowledge is very important, I think. You know, we fill our heads with all kinds of weird knowledge. It's out here, and it's really easy to grab, especially right now. And I have a feeling, like, especially for you younger generation, get this knowledge as much as you can right now. Record as much as you can, because I think the internet will probably get stifled out. I've recorded so much way back in the 90s. I'm glad I did, because you can't get that stuff anymore. I have things that nobody has. Start grabbing it right now, because the internet will be stifled and more stifled and more stifled as it goes along. Soon there'll be no commenting on YouTube. Okay? All right? Mark my words. Okay, so these guys are cool.
was top secret. The general public weren't to know. But how do you hide a huge nuclear explosion? Well, the Albuquerque Tribune published a statement claiming it was a large but accidental conventional explosion.
That's right.
It wasn't just the general public who were kept in the dark. The governor of New Mexico was not even aware that Trinity was a nuclear test until after the bombing of Hiroshima.
You know this much. Man, I don't even, I've gotten off of social media, but I'm sure you guys know, and you might even be the ones that regurgitate things. If you only get this much knowledge out of everything, I don't care which side you're on, left, right, you're in other countries, whatever else. If it's coming from America, it's this much is true. We tell the tallest tales over here. The tallest ones. And especially our political system. Both sides. All of them.
Even then, details about the blast were scarce. But Kodak, the film company based on the other side of the country in New York State, well, they figured out what was happening.
Damn right they did.
It all started with some defective X-ray film. Kodak found when they developed unused film, it showed 10s or even 100 little dark spots. The film had been exposed to radiation even though it had never been taken out of its packaging. This was actually not a new problem. During World War II, radium was used extensively to make glow-in-the-dark dials, flight instruments, and watches. Radium glows because it is radioactive. It gives off alpha particles. Now, some of this radium...
I had a glow-in-the-dark watch way back in the day. I wonder if I've worn radium. And I'm probably going to get cancer or something, you know? Think about all the stupid crap that we used to do, man. The X-ray machines at the foot store, you know, to go buy shoes. The foot store to buy some feet. I told you it was going to be the high hole. Shut your high hole. I'll tell you again. All right, let's go down this high hole again.
Paper and cardboard at these factories, and because supplies were scarce, leftover paper products were salvaged and recycled, leading small amounts of radium to end up in the general paper supply. And when this paper was used to package up Kodak film, radiation from radium would expose the film before it was ever used. And it was such a problem that Kodak altered their supply chain, carefully selecting just a few paper mills where they could strictly control the raw materials. One of the mills was in Vincennes, Indiana, on the Wabash River.
So they already had this weird issue, okay? So they're already closely watching this stuff because of those radium thingies. And they are already like, okay, we have to choose a particular place so we can get paper that's not tainted with radioactive pieces that are going to expose little dots on our film, is what they're saying. So this is one of the 3 places that they can get their paper from where it's not tainted. One of 3 places where they can't get their paper from that's not tainted. So listen to that, man. Sink that in. I mean, like the whole story is really cool, but just that one little fact itself, just boom.
It made straw board, which was inserted between sheets of X-ray film. Now, for months, this straw board was working perfectly until a batch manufactured on August 6, 1945, started to cause spots to
a batch. August 6, 1945.
Appear on the X-ray film. So Julian Webb, a scientist at Kodak, was tasked with solving the problem. So he punched out little holes of straw board behind where the film had been exposed, and then he measured the alpha particles coming off that material. But the level was not appreciably higher than background, and this ruled out radium and the other naturally occurring isotopes of uranium, thorium, and actinium, all alpha emitters. But when he measured beta radiation, he found significant activity. This matched what he saw on the film. The radiation penetrated several layers, something beta particles can do, but not alpha. And over a period of months, he measured the half-life of the radioactive substance, finding it was only about 30 days. This half-life, combined with the energy of the beta particles, led Webb to conclude that the radioactive contaminant was most likely cerium-141, an isotope that could only have come from a nuclear fission explosion. What's more, the same contaminant appeared in paper from another of Kodak's mills, this one hundreds of kilometers away in Tama, Iowa. So how did cerium-141 end up in that straw board? Well, when that first atomic bomb exploded in the New Mexico desert.
So America's like, Shush. Oh gosh. Where's Kodak now?
The plutonium
What happened to
core
Kodak
underwent a
as a
fission
company?
chain reaction. Plutonium nuclei
Somebody look
ripped
into that and tell me in the
releasing
comments.
energy and more neutrons to continue the chain reaction. But fission is a messy process. It doesn't always split the nucleus into the same products. Instead, hundreds of different nuclei are produced, virtually all of them radioactive.
Gonna learn
They are
today.
carried up into the stratosphere with the mushroom cloud and dispersed on air currents whichever way the wind blows. In this case, they traveled over 1,000 kilometers, ending up over Iowa and Indiana. Here, rain captured some of these radioactive particles, causing them to fall out of the sky, hence the term radioactive fallout. This radioactive material ended up in rivers like the ones that run beside the two Kodak paper mills, which used that river water to make their paper. So that's how cerium-141 ended up fogging Kodak's X-ray film and exposing the US nuclear secret. Now, word of Kodak's detection made it back to scientists at Los Alamos who were intrigued and wanted to know more. A consultant wrote to Webb to find out how much radioactivity per square mile he detected and the size of the particles which fell and the half-life of the activity. Although Webb completed his experiments by the end of 1945, he only published them in Physical Review in 1949.
The fogging of photographic film by radioactive contaminants in cardboard packaging materials by J.H. Webb. You can go get this as a PDF. Interesting read.
And that's because I'm sure he recognized just how sensitive his findings were. After all, he himself had worked on the Manhattan Project at Berkeley and Oak Ridge using electromagnetic techniques to separate uranium isotopes. What was clear to Kodak was that they needed to take steps to protect their film. And so they installed air samplers to monitor for fallout in the air intakes of their buildings.
Fallout is a vitally important subject. Bombs are being tested, which to some extent contaminate the atmosphere.
We're going to explain fallout
now, the
for
U.S.
you.
government was aware they needed to carefully consider where to test nuclear bombs.
What we need is a site closer to our stateside laboratories and available air support. Somewhere in the continental United States. But where?
After Trinity, the Manhattan Project's chief of radiological safety, Stafford Warren, recommended tests be conducted at least 150 miles from civilian populations. In 1948, an Air Force meteorologist, Colonel Holzman, told the Site Selection Committee that a location on the East Coast would be best, because otherwise the prevailing westerly winds across the U.S. would spread the fallout across the country. The site they chose was Nevada, almost as far west as you can go and just 100 miles from Las Vegas. The rationale was this site was closer to weapons labs, so it would accelerate their development.
Right.
After the first bomb test there in 1951, Kodak detected fallout at their headquarters in Rochester, New York. After a snowstorm, Geiger counters read 25 times the normal background. So Kodak threatened to sue the U.S. government for the considerable amount of damage to our products resulting from the Nevada tests or from any further atomic energy tests. But instead of a lawsuit, the two sides came to an agreement. The Atomic Energy Commission would give Kodak, and indeed the entire photographic industry, advanced warning about upcoming tests and where the fallout was likely to end up given meteorological models.
We'll tell you.
In return, the company agreed to keep quiet about radioactive fallout.
You bothered by that a little bit? Slightly. I mean, there's just so many different ones. I mean, you know, I didn't say we're gonna like, you know, I'm down the middle. You know, there might be a good reason.
From 1951 until 1963, the U.S. conducted 100 above-ground nuclear tests in Nevada.
Utah.
The resulting mixture of radioactive nuclei was blown, as predicted, across most of the country.
Oh shit.
When these atoms fell on agricultural land, they were eaten by livestock or taken up in crops, and they became part of the food supply. Radioactive iodine-131, eaten by cows, is passed on to humans through their milk. And this is particularly problematic because iodine is concentrated by the body in the thyroid gland. And children with small developing thyroids drink the most milk. It's estimated that the nuclear tests led to tens of thousands of extra cases of thyroid cancer. The Atomic Energy Commission wasn't too worried about iodine-131 because it has a radioactive half-life of only 8 days. It decays quickly. They were more concerned about strontium-90, which has a half-life of almost 30 years.
Strontium-90, because of a unique combination of properties, probably represents the greatest danger.
Strontium-90 behaves biochemically like calcium, so when ingested it ends up in our teeth and bones, and as it emits ionizing beta radiation, it can cause bone cancer, cancer in the surrounding tissues, or leukemia. In what's become known as the baby tooth survey, scientists in St. Louis collected up 320,000 teeth between 1950 and 1970. They found that kids born in 1963 had 50 times more strontium in their baby teeth than those born in 1950.
Presently existing evidence indicates that fallout has caused only a small increase in background radiation and correspondingly only a minute increase in mutation.
All this invisible mental and invisible physical things that you don't know about, man, that they do. You need to start pointing your knowledge thirst in the correct areas, I do believe. I think some people, you know, no, I'm not just talking to you, but the, you know, earthlings in general.
In reality, both iodine-131 and strontium-90, plus other radioactive isotopes in the fallout, almost certainly increased rates of cancer and other diseases in the US population. This is borne out by studies showing correlations between rates of disease and radioactive isotope uptake. The graph shows a peak in 1964, just after the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was signed in 1963. It banned nuclear tests in the atmosphere, underwater, and in outer space, leaving only underground tests. A central aim of the treaty was to address growing public concern over the scale of nuclear tests and the resulting radioactive fallout.
You think?
When the U.S. Senate finally held a hearing on the matter almost 50 years later in 1997, the agreement with Kodak was sharply criticized, especially by Senator Tom Harkin, who said, "The government warned the entire photographic industry and provided maps and forecasts of potential contamination. Where, I ask, were the maps for dairy farmers? Where were the warnings to parents of children in these areas? The government protected rolls of film, but not the lives of our kids. There is something wrong with this picture." And I think the main problem was that in the 40s and 50s, not enough was known about the biological effects of radioactive fallout.
Bullshit.
Every so often a gene changes or mutates.
Those boys were
and
playing
the
with
characteristic of the organism is altered.
what was it? What is it called? The demon sphere? Let's check that out real quick. Let's go down another thing. I think it's really cool. We're going to add a few more things because it's atomic stuff. The demon sphere. The demon sphere. I hate typing. Let's run through just a quick piece of this real quick here.
Masses of uranium and plutonium respectively, meaning that no self-sustaining nuclear reaction would be possible with the spheres alone, and the nickel plating that covered them would prevent most of the escaping radiation from harming you. The real harm comes later.
All right, so this is like a sphere of...
The terrible explosions that Little Boy and Fat Man are famous for only happen when a nuclear core goes critical, using directed conventional explosives to artificially induce a critical mass. This meant literally compressing a plutonium or uranium sphere into a much smaller volume.
So they knew what they were doing. They knew how dangerous it was, and they used to play with these things. And there was a few guys that died. I suggest you go watch this video too. This is really cool. Or look at the demon sphere and the shit that it caused. It's mind blowing as well. I don't know exactly what time it was, what year it happened, but I'm sure it was earlier enough to know what was going on by this time here, for sure. Like they knew. They knew. I mean, the guys that did the experiment knew to ask everybody exactly where they were standing at in the room. It was that important. They knew exactly what was going on. The horseshit that comes out of our government's mouth is just beyond.
We do not know the exact process by which mutations occur.
Cancers took years or even decades to appear, and fallout models predicted a more uniform and therefore less concentrated spread of contaminants. When students in Albany, New York measured 1,000 times background levels after a heavy rainstorm, well, the Atomic Energy Commission's report about the event called it an interesting example of a small area of very intense fallout. Now, concerned with alarming people unnecessarily in downwind communities, the Atomic Energy Commission's approach was to limit as much as possible the information that was shared. Their conclusion, it seems, was that people are less sensitive to radiation than film is.
So the studies of radioactive fallout remain inconclusive.
What is certain is that 1945 marked the start of a new era. No radioactive fallout before then, and lots after it. And scientists have shown you can use this to detect wine forgeries. Any wine made in the last 75 years will give off distinctive gamma rays from cesium-137, whereas none before that date will. Plus, the level of activity can be used to estimate the vintage, at least between 1952 and 1980. A similar technique can be used to detect art forgeries, because old paint contains no radioactive cesium or strontium. You can even use strontium-90 to determine the age of a skeleton, how long ago that person died, given it's in the past 75 years or so. This technique has been employed in dozens of forensic cases, where there previously was no reliable method of estimating the year of death if it was within the last 50 years. This method works because while we're alive, we are ingesting strontium-90, something that stops when we die. To this day, we all have some strontium-90 in our bones, albeit at lower levels. It's been about 2 half-lives since the peak of radioactive contamination, so 3/4 of it have decayed, and the rest has dispersed throughout the environment. So these days, it's no longer much of a health concern. Still, it is there, inside every one of us, a signal that can't be covered up or faked. We are of this modern age. In your bones are the literal atomic fragments of atomic bombs that exploded decades ago.
Bastards. Straight up bastards. Oh my goodness, man. That's absolutely crazy there, man. All right, so what's up next, man? Let's see, light bulb finds and planned obsolescence. I hope I say that right. Let's speak this in there. Which one was that? I think I had that in there for a saved for later. Let's go into it. Let's see. Light bulb finds planned obsolescence. Check this one out here. Weird histories, man, and yeah, I think
more about them at the end of
it's
the video.
Crazy that you're like, oh, I'll learn something about some light bulbs, you know.
6. And in here, they have
or the videos why we can't have nice things.
Continuously on light bulb in the world. It has been on for 120 years, since 1901. There it is, huh? It's not even connected to a light switch, but it does have a backup battery and generator. So the big question is, how has this light bulb lasted so long? It was manufactured by hand not long after commercial light bulbs were first invented.
Okay, so, I'm an old guy, and it's definitely I remember it said a lot. Man, they don't make that shit like they used to. And I'm probably like one of the last generation that says that, and no one's going to be saying that anymore. It's probably something that doesn't, let's take that saying it's racist or whatever. I don't know. It's a bad saying. It doesn't go. It goes for consumerism and everything else. It's crazy that, and I know it. Being an engineer kind of a person and fixing things, I know I make things better. And I can do it all the time. I'm always taking something cheap and going, all right, well, if I add a little bracket here, put a screws in here, put a little more a structural integrity into this thing, or whatever it may be, it's usually just is like, let's put out something with the slimmest amount of garbage that we can put into it, cheap as possible per unit, and who cares how long it lasts? I don't know. We're just instant garbage buyers. It's just silly that you guys do this. I mean, with anything, games, anything. You buy broken stuff, and you guys are like, just give them a chance. Just give them a chance. I'll buy it broken. Where does that become a new norm?
and yet it has been running for over 1 million
guys, but,
hours,
you know, some
way
people,
longer than
dude.
any light bulb today is meant to last.
A while back, a friend of
Cool,
mine
they got a
told me
camera
this
on it.
story, that someone had invented a light bulb that would last forever, years ago, but they never sold it because an everlasting light bulb makes for a terrible business model. I mean, you would never have any repeat customers, and eventually you would run out of people to sell light bulbs to. I thought this story sounded ridiculous. If you could make an everlasting light bulb, then everyone would buy your light bulb over the competitors. And so you could charge really high prices, make a lot of money, even if demand would eventually dry up. I just couldn't imagine that we had...
Stop the video for a moment. Hey, there's a site where you can go check out the light bulb that it's on. Updates every 30 seconds, so you just get a snippet. It's still on. You get a picture of it and what's going on at the firehouse there. You know, interesting. We like to check things out as I go through things. We're going down the high hole. Shut your high hole.
better light bulbs in the past and then intentionally made them worse. But it turns out I was wrong. At least, sort of. Inventing a viable electric light was hard. I mean, this is the typical incandescent design, which just involves passing electric current through a material, making it so hot that it glows. You know, less than 5% of the electrical energy comes out as light. The other 95% is released as heat.
Wasteful.
So these are really heat bulbs, which give off a little bit of light as a byproduct. You know, the temperature of the filament can get up to 2800 Kelvin.
World's leading light bulb companies: Philips, International General Electric, Tokyo Electric, Osram from Germany, and the UK's Associated Electric, among others. They formed what became known as the Phoebus Cartel, named after Phoebus, the Greek god of light. There, all these companies agreed to work together to help each other by controlling the world's supply of light bulbs. In the early days of the electrical industry, there had been lots of different small light bulb manufacturers, but by now, they had largely been consolidated into these big corporations, each dominant in a particular part of the world. The biggest threat they all faced was from longer-lasting light bulbs. For example, in 1923, Osram sold 63 million light bulbs, but the following year, they sold only 28 million. Light bulbs were lasting too long, eating into sales. So all the companies in the cartel agreed to reduce the lifespan of their bulbs to 1,000 hours, cutting the existing average almost in half.
But how could each company ensure that the other companies would actually follow the rules and make shorter lasting light bulbs? After all, it would be in each of their individual interests to make a better product to outsell the others.
Wouldn't it be?
Well, to enforce the 1,000-hour limit, each of the manufacturers had to send in sample bulbs from their factories, and they were tested on big test stands like this one. If a bulb lasted significantly longer than 1,000 hours, well, then the company was fined. If a bulb...
What? I mean, how could they spin this? How are you going to possibly spin this, you know? How would you possibly spin this, guys? You know, if you were some kind of trying to manipulate people.
Bulb lasted longer than 3,000 hours?
How could you possibly spin this? Could you possibly like figure out like how this could possibly make some kind of a weird victim, and then just go full-fledged and then go, you know, make this into a victim thing, and then get some victims behind this to push this agenda, and it's really crazy. Watch this. This is really crazy how you can be manipulated.
Well, the fine was 200 Swiss francs for every 1,000 bulbs sold, and there are records of these fines being issued to companies. But how do you make a worse light bulb in the first place? Well, the same engineers who had previously been tasked with extending the lifespan now had to find ways to decrease it. So they tried different materials, different shaped filaments, and thinner connections. And if you look at the data, they were successful. Ever since the formation of the cartel, the lifespan of light bulbs steadily decreased. so that by 1934, the average lifespan was just 1,205 hours. And just as they had planned, sales increased for cartel members by 25% in the 4 years after 1926. And even though the cost of components came down, the cartel kept prices virtually unchanged, so they increased their profit margins. So did people know that the light bulb companies were conspiring together to make their products worse? No. The Phoebus Cartel claimed that its purpose was to increase standardization and efficiency of light bulbs. I mean, they did establish this screw thread as standard. You can find it on virtually all light bulbs around the world now.
Well, that's
but
cool.
all evidence points to the cartels being motivated by profits and increased sales, not by what was best for consumers. So, one of the reasons this light bulb has lasted so long is because it was made before the cartel era. Another reason is because the filament has always been run at low power, just 4 or 5 watts. It was meant to be a night light for the fire station, to provide just enough light so that firemen wouldn't run into things at night. And the fact that it was always on reduced the thermal cycling of the filament and components, limiting the stress caused by thermal expansion and contraction. The Phoebus Cartel was initially planned to last at least until 1955, but it fell apart in the 1930s. It was already struggling due to outside competition and non-compliance amongst some of its members, but the outbreak of World War II is really what finished it off. So this cartel was dead, but its methods survive to this day. There are lots of companies out there that intentionally...
You know, and I was just reading something about the company moved and it went to Switzerland, and you know, these companies just launder themselves and they just change their name and move to something else, and they'll move to something else and change their name, and they'll lobby against their old company's name and be like, oh yeah, fuck those guys. It's so crazy. So crazy. And people just just eat it up, man.
Shorten the lifespan of their products. It's a tactic known now as planned obsolescence.
Planned obsolescence.
This was actually the subject of Casey Neistat's first viral video, all the way back in 2003.
Thank you for calling Apple. My name's Ryan. May I have your first name, please? Casey. All right. What seems to be the issue today?
I have an iPod that I bought about 18 months ago, and the battery is dead on it.
18 months. Okay, it's past its year, which basically means for there'll be a charge of $255 plus a mailing fee to send it to us to refurb it, to correct it. But at that price, you might as well go get a new one.
That's right. You might
This
as well just
video
go get a
got
new one.
millions of views in a time before YouTube or social media.
That's right.
And it spawned
You guys don't
a
remember
class
this.
action lawsuit, which Apple settled out of court. But it didn't stop the
He
company
settled
from
it out of
practicing
court.
planned
You guys, man, just don't remember all this weird stuff. I remember all this garbage, man. You guys don't remember this. This is why I'm here to get you out of those stupid high holes that you go down and get you into the right kind of high hole. Shut your high hole and come on, let's go down.
obsolescence. After an iOS update in 2017, users of older iPhones found apps loading significantly slower or the device shutting down altogether. Apple said they throttled performance to protect the battery of older devices and
it's for
increase
your
their
own good.
longevity. Of course, that wouldn't be an issue if the battery were replaceable. In a series of lawsuits that concluded in 2020, Apple was fined or reached settlements to pay hundreds of millions of dollars. Undoubtedly, this amount pales in comparison to the extra revenue they generate by limiting the lifespan of their products.
Chump change compared.
But some would argue that planned obsolescence isn't just about greed, but that it's also good for everyone.
All right, so how are we going to spin this? And you know, it's kind of really crazy how any kind of, I feel like any kind of thing that needs to be backed up like this always goes for this victimhood thing. And I think that's, it's actually really devalued any kind of victim story in my book anyway. Anyway, let's go down this. Shut your pie hole.
During the Great Depression in the 1930s, when as much as a quarter of Americans were out of work, an American real estate broker, Bernard London, proposed mandatory planned obsolescence as a way to get people back to work and lift America out of the Depression.
Mandatory planned obsolescence.
I would have the government assign a lease of life.
Mandatory planned obsolescence. It's got to be done. It's to protect you, the worker. It's to protect, so you can have work. It's to protect the worker, and then we can build the machines to replace the worker, and you can work on those. Well, fuck the worker. This is great.
To shoes and homes and machines when they are first created, and they would be sold and used within the term of their existence definitely known by the consumer. After the allotted time had expired, these things would be legally dead and would be controlled by the duly appointed governmental agency and destroyed if there is widespread unemployment.
Wow, I didn't go that far, but, you know, maybe just not that blatant would be the word I would choose now. That's a better word. They did go that far, but not that blatant.
Now this might sound like a wild, fringe idea, but people were clearly afraid of being put out of work by technological progress and products that were too good. There was even a popular...
Yes, and you know what? And that was an easy thing to do back in the time. I mean, you know... Wow. What a way to manipulate those kind of people right there. And it kind of reminds me of maybe, you know, like the Black Lives Matter and the LGBT community, you know, great things, and rightfully so of being victims in their own right, but their victimhood being manipulated to back up and push a weird agenda can kind of maybe translate to this method of what they're doing to these people, sort of. In my, you know, no man's high hole opinion. Shut my high hole.
Oscar-nominated film about it. This is The Man in the White Suit from 1951. It's about a scientist who invents the perfect fiber.
Crazy.
It won't stain or break or fray.
I think I've succeeded in the copolymerization of M.
This is propaganda at its finest, folks. This is wicked. This is like something like, this is like the, like when I was talking earlier, like, you know, the companies, they'll make some propaganda. Ugh. Just, man, focus your knowledge on maybe just looking in for the right things. You know, just ask yourself. I mean,
amino acid residues and carbohydrate molecules, both containing ionic groups. It's really perfectly simple.
The Academy Award nomination was for Best Screenplay.
I kid you not. That's funny.
Anyway, everyone is initially excited about our hero's scientific discovery. He makes a suit out of the thread, and it has to be white because the fiber is so stain-resistant it can't even be dyed. But this is when trouble strikes.
Ooh.
The factory owners realize they won't be able to sell as much of this thread because it's so durable. And the workers worry it'll put them out of a job.
Why can't you
There you go.
scientists leave things alone? What about my bit of washing when there's no washing to do?
That's right.
This is when you get the climactic scene where factory workers and factory owners team up to chase down the scientist to destroy him and his invention. And believe it or not, this...
Now, look at the mob. Like, it's like the mob scene. Get him. Oh my god, it's so powerful. And then, like, yeah, okay, so one of the brain games, they do the gosh, let's go there. Let's see if I can find this really quick, because this is funny. Brain games in the office where everybody stands up during the beep. There we go. Watch this. We're just gonna watch this together. I can't believe I found that on the first thing.
We set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is.
I'm so glad we're gonna get some brain games in
never
here.
go along with this, or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
So they're cycling the people out. There was actors in there. So there was actors in there at first.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do?
Oh yeah. Hell yeah, she
She's
will.
now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we
That's right.
introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
Have a seat, and they'll be out in just a couple minutes. Great, thanks so much.
What?
Everybody was doing
it.
Think she'll teach the new
This is
guy what to do?
crazy. She feels weird. I don't want you to feel weird.
We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived.
You gotta explain it to the next person. Hey, there's two. Yeah.
And slowly but surely,
Let's pump some more people in here.
what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room. Here to explain what's going on in their brains is Jonah Berger of the University of Pennsylvania.
This sort of internalized form of herd behavior is part of what we call social learning. Starting at a very early age, when we see members of our group perform a task, our
Super
brains literally
crazy,
reward
man.
us for following in their footsteps.
When I saw everybody stand up, I felt like I needed to join them. Otherwise, I'm like excluded. Once I decided.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy, man. That's crazy, man.
Movie may have been inspired by real events. In the 1940s, the synthetic fiber nylon replaced silk in stockings, and it was so durable that the products
So if we can get you to just show you enough social media and just get you to shove enough down people's throats, it almost just, makes itself. It's really crazy.
became an overnight sensation. There were literal riots when women tried to get their hands on them. When the manufacturers realized they had made the product too good, they didn't destroy the fiber, but they did follow the example of the Phoebus Cartel. They instructed their engineers and scientists to find ways to weaken the product, to shorten its lifespan so people would have to buy more.
Now, it seems like consumers are finally fighting back against planned obsolescence. In the European Union and in over 25 states in the US, there's proposed legislation to enshrine the right to repair. Now, these laws would force manufacturers to make it easier to repair their products. They would have to provide information and access to parts, so you could replace a battery or fix a cracked screen at a third-party repair shop without voiding your warranty. So, if the right to repair does become law, does that mean artificial obsolescence will be gone for good? Sadly, no, because there is one last thing manufacturers can use to make their products obsolete, which is you.
Henry Ford released the first mass-market car, the Model T, in 1908.
Terrible,
and
man.
he envisioned it like a workhorse, an affordable tool that wouldn't wear out, a bit like the everlasting light bulb. In 1922, Ford said, "We want the man who buys one of our cars never to have to buy another. We never make an improvement that renders any previous model obsolete." But by 1920, 55% of American families already owned a car. Nearly everyone that could afford one had one. And that same year, there was a small economic downturn driving down sales for both Ford and General Motors. In 1921, DuPont, the chemical and paint company, took over the controlling share in General Motors, and they started experimenting with painting cars different colors. Up until then, Henry Ford had said, you could have whatever color you like, so long as it's black. It took a couple years of testing, but in 1924, GM released their first cars in different colors, and soon after, they introduced a trick that feels very familiar now. Each new year, they would introduce cars in different colors.
The goal wasn't just to make Ford's Model T look outdated, but to make their own cars feel outdated every year, encouraging customers to trade in their old cars for shiny new ones. Years later, GM's head of design Harley Earl candidly discussed his role in creating what he called dynamic obsolescence. Our big job is to hasten obsolescence. In 1934, the average car ownership span was 5 years. Now, which was 1955, it is 2 years. When it is 1 year, we will have a perfect score.
Wow.
By the time he said this, General Motors was the most valuable company in the world, and it sold half of all vehicles purchased in the US every year. These days, the world's most valuable company, Apple, seems to have copied directly out of this
yeah,
playbook.
you know, everybody
new
does.
styles
It's
every year?
garbage out
Check.
there.
New
Instant
special
garbage
colors
is what
every
you're
year?
buying. It's just, it's crazy to see it happen. And that, like I said, it was a, you know, I said earlier, you know, it's a norm. It seems to be with the newer generation. It's the new norm. You guys have accepted it. This is not acceptable. It's not acceptable as a consumer, as people. I mean, but you don't know how to fix anything. Then how can you, if you don't even understand it? I fear. All right, so last but not least, Intervision. Let's see. Well, I wanted to show that real quick. Elon Musk interview with Intervision.
In the past has been bad, but not...
No. What did I do it right here? Elon Musk interview with Intervision. I think this is it right here.
I wanted to ask you, say tomorrow you get a phone call from Joe Biden and he says...
I think that's unlikely, but sure.
Okay. You know, he just gives you a call and he says, you know, I haven't been talking a lot about Tesla lately, but, you know, what do you need from this bill? What are your needs? What do you answer him?
I like Elon, man. I like to go down a high hole with Elon.
I mean, to be
Shut your high hole.
totally frank, I don't know if we, at least no one at Tesla has actually brought up whether they care about this bill or not. I think if this bill happened or didn't happen, I don't know. We don't think about it at all, really.
Okay.
It might be better. Honestly, it might be better if the bill doesn't pass, because we've spent so much money. You know, it's like the federal budget deficit is insane. You know, it's like $3 trillion. Federal expenditures are $7 trillion. Federal revenue is $4 trillion. That's a $3 trillion difference in. If this was a company, it'd be a $3 trillion loss. So I don't know if we should be adding to that loss. That seems pretty crazy. Something's got to give. You can't just spend $3 trillion more than you own every year and expect, you know, don't expect something bad to happen. I think, you know, this is not good.
Well, Mitch McConnell is actually saying...
In fact, if I may elaborate on that, the deficit is more than $3 trillion when you look at the future obligations. So it's $7 trillion of current expenditures, but it's much more than that if you look at future obligations for Social Security, Medicare, and so forth. So we're running this incredible deficit. Something's got to give. I don't know. This can't keep going.
Well, Mitch McConnell said something similar. That it wasn't too, not as extreme as you, but it just okay. So let's say his follow-up question is, okay, Elon, you don't think we need to spend anything on the infrastructure? If he says to you, what is the biggest improvement we can make to the U.S. infrastructure? What do you say?
I think we generally could have better airports, better highways, and
that's where he kind of loses me. You know, he's such a highway guy. You know,
especially in cities that are congested, we've got to do something to deal with the extreme traffic, which I think is
he goes off on this highway thing, which you know, he's like into that, the tunnel thing, which I think it's kind of right. And I think if you build those things, then maybe you can run electrical along with those, that infrastructure.
As
So
autonomous vehicles come to the fore, and it's easier to drive without going through the pain of having to drive yourself, which is absolutely coming, and will be one of the biggest transformations
computers can
ever in human civilization.
make traffic flow correctly.
There will be more cars on the road, and the traffic will get much worse.
I would trust a
So
computer more than
really
the
need to do
younger generation
some
now.
combination
People
of
on their
tunnels,
cell phones I mean,
or like I said, double-deckering freeways. I'm not a big
It's a
believer
problem.
in
That's a
flying
problem.
cars. They're basically helicopters with wheels, and people don't want the skies to be swarming with helicopters. So it's tunnels and double-deckering freeways. We don't have a traffic problem in suburbs. We have a traffic problem on freeways because they were just too small and did not anticipate the size of the urban environments they would currently experience. So, yeah, but I don't see a strong effort in this direction.
Well, I want to come back to autonomous vehicles, but want to just stay a little bit more on the role of government. You said at this conference actually a year ago that you think government should really just be hands-off when it comes to innovation. Though with this bill, there is a lot of support for EVs, and it could be the biggest change that we've seen throughout the country in terms of the infrastructure of EVs, and it helps Tesla. What do you think the role of government should be?
I think the role of government should be that of like a referee, and you know, like, but not a player on the field. Generally, you know, government should, I think, just try to get out of the way and not impede progress. I think there's a general problem, not just in the U.S., but in most countries, where the rules and regulations keep increasing every year. Rules and regulations are immortal. They don't die. There's not a natural. Occasionally, you see some law with a sunset provision, but really, otherwise, the vast majority of rules and regulations live forever. And so if more rules and regulations are applied every year, and it just keeps growing and growing, eventually it just takes longer and longer, and it's harder to do things. And there's not really an effective garbage collection system for removing rules and regulations.
wow, there's not. So this is really like, listen to this, and we're going to end the video here, man. I mean, that's just great.
You see some law with a sunset provision, but really, otherwise, the vast majority of rules and regulations live forever. And so if more rules and regulations are applied every year, and it just keeps growing and growing, eventually it just takes longer and longer, and it's harder to do things. And there's not really an effective garbage collection system for removing rules and regulations. And so gradually this hardens the arteries of civilization, where you're able to do less and less over time. So I think government should be really trying hard to get rid of rules and regulations that perhaps had some merit at some point, but don't have merit currently. But there's very little effort in this direction. This is a big problem.
He says it a few times. There's very little effort in this area. It's a big problem.
We should have on that. But you're right now. You're sitting in a Tesla
pretty
factory.
cool. So
how are you spending your time?
That's it, man. That's my high hole for the week. I've written down a few different things. I just wanted to kind of wowed me. You know, I don't really go down the hole too often, but I will check out a few things that's piqued my eye, and then sometimes a few videos catch me, and I just thought I'd jump down there and share it with you. All right, eat your peas. Call your mom. Tell somebody you love them. See you on the next video.